Welcome to the TalentGrow Show, where you can get actionable, results-oriented insight and advice on how to take your leadership, communication, and people skills to the next level and become the kind of leader people want to follow. And now, your host and leadership development strategist, Halelly Azulay.
Hey, welcome back, Talent Growers. I'm glad that you're here to listen to another episode of the TalentGrow Show. I'm Halelly Azulay, your leadership development strategist. And before we dive into this episode, which will be a solo episode where I will teach you how to say no in a way that allows you to stay true to your intentions without damaging your relationships, I wanted to play you a quick feedback message that I received. As you might know, there is a very easy and quick way to send me a voicemail via my website, talentgrow.com. From any device, there is a little black tab on the right-hand side that will pop up, and all you have to do is just record a quick, short message to me. It can be feedback, it can be a comment, it can be a question. And Ken Steiger did that, and I wanted to play his message. It was in response to my episode 78, in which I shared 3 leadership lessons when I celebrated the TalentGrow Show turning 3. So that's why he wishes the show a happy birthday. All right, let's take a listen.
Happy birthday, TalentGrow podcast. Way to go, Halellly. What a terrific episode that you just gave us. Thanks for sharing that. The podcasts have just gotten better and better and better. Just so professional, so informative, so well done. Thank you for sharing. Congratulations.
That was so nice of you, Ken. Thank you so much for your message. I appreciate you. And you, listener, I know that you might have some feedback, a comment, or some kind of question, and I encourage you to do the same thing. And as a matter of fact, if you have found value in this show and have something nice to say, I would super appreciate you leaving that in the form of an iTunes or Apple Podcasts, as it's now called, review. It's so easy to do, and it adds so much value. So think about that. I hope that you will take the time to do it as just an appreciation of the show that I send to you for free every single week. All right. Without further ado, let us get into this episode, a solo episode of the TalentGrow Show. And it's actually a continuation of my most recent Ask Halelly episode 82, where I shared why saying yes too much could be sabotaging you in your career in more than one way. And I promised in that show that I will give you more tips on what to do instead of saying yes all the time. In fact, how to say no. So this episode is for you if you're one of the many people that I work with and meet all the time who have a tendency to say yes too much. First, I wanted to have you explore, why don't we want to say no? What's the problem with saying no? Now, again, some people don't have a problem with it, but many people do. So why is saying no something that we often want to avoid like it's the plague? One reason might be that we worry about being seen as someone who's not a team player or who doesn't have a can-do attitude. Another reason we worry about saying no is that it might make us be resented or disliked by the other person. We don't want them to dislike us, so we say yes. Or we might worry that it will damage our trust or the intimacy in that relationship if we say no. We also sometimes worry about being passed up for future opportunities, right? If we say no to something now, then in the future, when there is an opportunity we would love to be part of, that person might decide preemptively not to even offer it to us because in the past we've said no, so now they won't come to us. In fact, what are some other reasons that you're reluctant to say no? I'd love to hear what you are thinking about when you're worried about saying no, and you can put that in the comments in the show notes, or you can tweet at me, or you can leave me a voicemail. But regardless, a lot of times, the worry that we have is something we can address without avoiding saying no. So first, let's make sure that you don't think that just because you don't feel like it, you should say no. I am not promoting laziness, and I am not promoting you being disobedient or unresponsive or unhelpful in general. So be clear, why are you saying no? If you know that there is a legitimate reason, then that should help you avoid feeling guilty about saying no and feel like you are within your rights to do so. There are definitely times when your answer should be yes. So give it some thought and don't go with a knee-jerk reaction or a gut reaction here, okay? But what are some appropriate reasons to say no? So one totally legit reason to say no is if the request is unreasonable. If in your judgment, the request is either completely absurd or inappropriate in some way or unreasonable for another reason, then you should say no. Now, if you still want to say yes for any other reason, then what you're going to need to do is figure out a more reasonable alternative and work with the requester for finding a more reasonable alternative, one that you feel comfortable saying yes to. We can talk more about how you can negotiate with the requester later. So one reason that it is totally legit to say no is an unreasonable request. Another reason where it's appropriate to say no is when the request offers a poor match with your skill set or with your job responsibilities. So sometimes you're just not the right person for doing whatever it is. It's not your job, or you shouldn't be doing it, or there's someone who's better suited for the task, or for whatever reason, you saying yes to this or doing it will subvert an established process or a chain of command or an assigned responsibility that you have. So if there is someone else who's probably better skilled or for whom this is a priority, not for you, or who should be working on this, then by you taking over it, you're actually getting in their way of success or in their way of being accountable to their responsibilities. And so you should say no to that. Another reason why it would be perfectly okay for you to say no is when the request is in poor alignment with your goals. Now, while you may be tempted to commit to a task that's outside of your stated goals because you want to be seen as a team player, you should only do so if it doesn't jeopardize your other work. This is not a selfish reason. Sometimes people worry about being seen as selfish. Now, in another episode one day, I hope to talk about this word selfish and unpack some of the unintended consequences of us assigning it the wrong meaning. But for the right reasons where you don't want to be seen as a non-team player, you should be working in a goal-directed way. To be efficient, to be effective, you have to be working in a goal-directed way, which means that as you are setting goals for yourself, I assume that they were well-designed and they are already, by definition, aligned to your team's goals, to your department's goals, to your manager's goals, to your chain of command, to your organization. So by definition, if you're working in a goal-directed way, your goals are aligned with other people's goals around you. And so for you to not take something on that doesn't align with your goals means that you are protecting everybody else. It's not just you looking out for you. Another reason why it's okay to say no is when it conflicts, whatever they're requesting of you conflicts with your current priorities. Again, if you're thinking about your work in a goal-directed way, it also means that you took the time to strategize how you should assign yourself, your time, your energy to a variety of tasks in front of you. And everything that you should have in your plan should align to your goals and should be prioritized. So if you really did this work, if you're working in a prioritized rather than a haphazard way, then you should know what your priorities are. And sometimes when someone asks you to do something, it conflicts with your current priorities. And so if you really don't have the time to do it at all, or if you don't have the time to do it in a way that meets your and their quality standards for the outcomes given the other work that you're already committed to, then you should say no to that request. If you don't have the time required to devote to it, you're not helping anybody by committing to it, by saying yes to it, because what will end up happening is either it will fall through the cracks or the other work that you deemed as priority will fall through the cracks, and it will cause you to fall behind on other work that's already on your list of priorities. You're not helping anyone. If it's not a priority, then you're going to need to do something different about it. Maybe you'll need to defer it to someone else. Maybe you'll need to delegate it. Maybe you'll need to defer it to another time. Or maybe you'll need to renegotiate your priorities. Even sometimes when the task is aligned in some way to your goals, it might not be a top priority right now, and you can't have a lot of different things be top priority. Something needs to be at the top. Something needs to be secondary. Something needs to be tertiary. So if this is vying for that attention, for that top priority category, that means whatever is already there needs to move down, right? So if you're being asked to move that to the top of your list, then you're going to need to ask the requester to help you say no to the other stuff. help you reprioritize, to help you renegotiate your priorities. And or ask them if it's okay for you to work on it when you're finished with your other priorities. Is it really urgent? Or is there someone else who can take care of it so that they can meet their deadline while you continue to work according to your predetermined priorities and your pre-assigned work goals? So the secret is thinking about whether it is appropriate to say no, thinking about some of the legitimate reasons to say no, and making sure that it's based on good reasons, but it's also how you deliver the message that will yield you the right results and the outcomes that you want without those outcomes that you dread. So how do you say no in a way that protects your time, that protects your independence, your integrity, and your relationships? Well, first of all, here's how not to do it. You know that BS about no is a complete sentence? It's not, okay? No is not a complete sentence if you care about the person, if you care about your relationship with them, and your ability to have trust and collaboration in the future. Because when you just say no and nothing else, of course it's going to either hurt their feelings, disappoint them, make you seem like an unreasonable person, or even make you seem like a jerk. This is going to hurt your relationship. So let's not fool ourselves. You should not just say no. In fact, I might surprise you, but I actually would like you to avoid saying no at all. Now you might be going, Halelly, are you crazy? You said this whole episode is about how to say no, and now you're telling me not to say no. Well, yes, kind of. No is not a good enough response when you care about maintaining your relationship with the person who's asking for something. So while you might be saying no in spirit, you need to have a more diplomatic, emotionally intelligent, relationship protecting way to respond to a request that they're making that you don't feel like you should take on. So there are ways to do it more effectively, and there are ways to do it less effectively. And here is where I want to help you see how to do this in an effective way. So your no response should be a way to give you the opportunity to protect your mutual interests and values for both parties involved. So saying no properly allows you to honor your values for yourself and the other's values. The key is recognizing what are the values that you're trying to honor and trying to create some kind of a win-win outcome for all parties involved whenever possible. What I'm definitely hoping that you will get from this is that I want you to avoid sacrificing yourself and your values to others. And I am also not asking you to sacrifice others for you. So there are a lot of different ways where multiple values can still be upheld, but it's really important for you to recognize first, what are the values at play here? So here are some key ones that I thought about. First, for yourself, what might be some values that you want to uphold for yourself? Well, first, I think that you should want to honor the sovereignty of your own plans and your priorities. If you've been thoughtful about how you've prepared yourself for your work and or how you spend your time, then you shouldn't allow someone else to completely override, sidestep, or throw your values, your plans off of the proverbial cliff. It's not fair. You also want to maintain your ownership of your time and energy, and you don't want to relinquish that to others to do with as they wish. But you also want to demonstrate to other people that you're a responsible, thoughtful person, that you have plans and priorities, that you've taken the time to be strategic about how you spend your time. And when they come to you with a request, you want to demonstrate that you've given your own schedule and plan some strategic thought and impress upon them that you're a serious and self-respecting person to be taken seriously and to be respected. In fact, when you just throw out your plans and just kind of lay down like a doormat whenever somebody comes to you with a request, and always, no matter what you've decided you were going to do, you just say yes. And in a way, you're saying to them, well, my own plans don't matter. You're more important than me. Your needs trump mine. I don't respect myself. Your wish is my command. This is not sending a message that will help them respect you, honor you, and have value for your ability to make good decisions about your time in the future. Now, whether you intend to do this or not, it is a message you're sending implicitly, like a subliminal message. And whether the other person is thinking about this or not about you, they actually pick up on this messaging subconsciously. And I think it definitely affects their ability to respect you and your plans. The bottom line is, if you don't seem like you respect yourself, you're sending a message to others that says, I am not worthy of your respect. I want you to think about that. You also have a value of being seen as helpful and supportive of others. You want your boss, your peers, important clients and vendors, everybody that you come across to know that you care about them and that you want to serve them. It's your job. You want to demonstrate that you want to be cooperative. No question. This is an important value. And it's often what's behind the decision to say yes and take on too much or take on the wrong thing. So you need to figure out how to communicate that this is a value for you, regardless of whether you accept or reject their request or their assignment. This is an important part of your message, and it needs to be demonstrated as explicitly as possible, rather than just being assumed or implied. So I'm going to help you with my formula that I'm going to share with you for how to say no to include this value. So I said that you need to think about what are the values that you're trying to uphold for yourself and for others. So we talked about values for yourself. Now, what might be some values that you have for others that you want to uphold in how you respond to their request? Well, I know that you want to support others in getting their needs met in the best possible way. In many cases, if you were to say yes when you really can't or shouldn't take on the task, you'd be doing the requester a disservice ultimately, because you would be causing them to put faith in you doing the work and either experience a delay in receiving the deliverable because you took on more than you can chew, or receiving something that is done in a way that doesn't meet their quality standards because you'll be doing it half-heartedly. So maybe they'll have it on time but not done well, or maybe they'll have it late. So you would be taking on something that you can't do or don't have the skill to do, and you won't be able to complete it in a high quality way. It's very likely that they didn't realize that you had a conflict of priorities with their request or a mismatch with skills. They don't know. So by them asking you, it doesn't mean that they really do believe that you're the best person with all the facts on the table. They just think that you are a good person, and they're coming to you with that request. And it is up to you to tell them the full reality, to help expose them to other information, to other facts, objective facts about your availability or about your fitness for this task that will help them make a fully informed decision. They probably didn't intend to give you something that you couldn't really accomplish in the given time. By informing them about your current conflicting priorities, you're helping them get a better understanding of the situation. So by saying no and helping them make an informed decision, you're helping them ensure that they get the results they seek. You're protecting their ability to have their needs met. You're taking care of them. They might need to reassign it to a more suitable person or a more available person. They might decide to reprioritize their deadline, or maybe they'll help you reprioritizing your existing workload. By explaining your current conflicting deadline or workload, you could help them avoid having unrealistic expectations and or disappointment later. You're also, though, helping to sustain a good relationship with them. And you're helping to prevent a corrosion of trust on both sides by being assertive and looking for a win-win solution. This is another value you have for them. You are also helping them avoid doing something that frustrates you or stresses you out when it probably wasn't their intention. And you are preventing them from being annoyed or disappointed or frustrated by you, by not upholding those unrealistic expectations that you will eventually need to let them down on if you just said yes. Again, a lot of times when you say yes because you're trying to protect trust and protect the relationship, you are often inadvertently causing something to happen that will ultimately hurt the relationship. And so I hope that you will stop doing that. The bottom line is, saying no is not bad when it comes with good reason. It's good for everyone involved because it takes into account the objective reality facts of the situation and helps both parties find a reasonable alternative that will allow for a win-win outcome. So I want to share with you my 5A formula for saying no in a way that helps you maintain your sovereignty over your own priorities without being seen as an uncooperative jerk. And I suggest you approach this difficult but doable and important task using this formula going forward. So I'd like to share the formula with you and use an example throughout to help make it more concrete and easier to understand. All right? So here's the example that we'll use. Let's just say that Ellen, who is a leader from the marketing department, is coming to ask you to write a section of a white paper that she's developing for your organization. And she explains that she needs your subject matter expertise for that section and that the deadline is this Friday. Now, you understand the importance of having accurate and useful white papers for the marketing department for marketing purposes, but you're currently working on an important client deliverable for your department that is taking up all of your available time and also is due this Friday. So there's no way that you could actually take on Ellen's request just straightforward and also meet your pre-existing deliverable deadline. So you can't really say yes as is. You decide that it is appropriate to say no to Ellen. It's a legitimate and appropriate approach, but you don't want to let Ellen down. You want to maintain a good relationship with her and with the marketing team in general. So here's how you should approach it using my 5A formula. Let me actually tell you what the 5 A's stand for, and then we'll break it down one by one, okay? So the first A is appreciate. The second A is assert. The third A stands for alternatives. The fourth A is for agree. And the fifth A is affirm. Let's break it down. First, appreciate the requester and or the request. Don't start with no, okay? The first thing you always want to do is acknowledge the positive value that you have for the person in an explicit way and for their needs. Start by expressing this to help them feel affirmed and ensure that when you say no, they don't have any reason to question your appreciation of their work and their needs or your relationship. So for example, you might say to Ellen, I appreciate your interest in including my perspective and knowledge in your white paper. Thank you. It sounds like an important project. I would love to support you. And, okay, so this is the first part, appreciate. Notice I ended there with the word and, where maybe your inclination would be to say, but, because you're about to say why you can't do it. Don't use the word but, use the word and. This sends a message of cooperativeness versus competitiveness, all right? So, Ellen, I appreciate your interest in including my perspective and knowledge in your white paper. It sounds like an important project. I would love to support you. And now you come to step 2, which is assert. Assert your conflicting interests or priorities or skill set or whatever whatever that legitimate reason for saying no. This is where you describe it in a short and objective way. Just fill in the blanks about what the requester might not know about your current situation that will prevent you from being able to accept their request. So in this situation, for example, you might say to Ellen, and from that before, I'm currently knee-deep in an important client deliverable project that is also due this Friday and requires all of my time. You see how I very simply, very quickly described to Ellen something she didn't know that causes me to have a conflict of interest with the timing that she's asking for her project. I can't do her project by Friday and my project by Friday, and I'm letting her know why. I'm giving her the objective reality facts. So, step 1, appreciate. Step 2, assert your reason for not being able to do it. Step 3, suggest alternatives. So, alternative is the A word. This could include you suggesting another person who might be qualified to help them and is more available, or maybe offering to delay their deadline to a time that allows you to successfully complete it. In other words, you'll take it on, but you just won't do it by Friday, or suggesting that they help you become free of your existing conflicting deadlines by helping you reprioritize or reassign them. And that could be either in whole or partially, whatever makes sense. So that might sound like, for the situation with Ellen, it might sound like, so Ellen, do you have any flexibility on that deadline? I could definitely work on it next week, once I'm done with my current project, she might say, oh, I didn't realize you had a deadline. Yeah, no problem. I can wait, right? We sometimes assume that the other person has a priority that cannot be moved, but we don't actually know their facts either. We just know our facts. Now we both know each other's facts. But maybe she can't. Maybe she has to have it by this Friday. If that's the case, she might tell you that. And then you'll say, well, maybe you could ask Jen or Mark on my team. They might have more availability right now, and they're just as knowledgeable about this topic, and they could help you. So you're suggesting that she might ask someone else. Or maybe if they're not available or she's not willing to ask the other people, maybe you could say, well, if you want, we could go together to my boss and see about reprioritizing my current responsibilities so that I can be freed up to help you with this important deadline. What do you think? So here I'm offering to help renegotiate what I already have on my task list. And if I can reassign that somehow or reestablish a deadline for that, I could help her, right? Maybe my boss asked me for the deliverable to be done by this Friday, but my boss might say, well, actually this white paper is really important. I know that the CEO is looking for it. So why don't we hold off on the client? I'll talk to the client, or I'll have someone else do this. Sometimes we just assume that other people can't flex to accommodate something, but if they know all the facts, they can make a smart prioritization decision. Or you could say something like, well, if you're willing to renegotiate the deliverable deadline with my client, I'd be happy to support you on this week. Again, when we work with objective facts and when we're explicit about what we already have going on, we're sending a message that we are planful, prioritized, respecting people, and we're asking for their mutual respect of what we've already planned, but we're also being flexible about the ability that perhaps there's another way to work at it that can create a win-win outcome. So this step probably might take a little bit of time, not a lot of time, but it'll take a little bit of back and forth with some suggestions or some ideas, and you're suggesting alternatives. Step 4 would mean that you agree on a next step. You agree on an approach forward. Once you've discussed alternatives, the requester needs to know what they're doing next, and you need to make sure that you both understand and are in agreement about what's going to happen going forward and that it is mutually acceptable. You do not want to leave things hanging. You don't want to let there be a chance for misinterpretation or disappointment about who is doing what by when. If you leave this conversation with a fuzzy, unclear, or unstated agreement on next steps, it will probably come back to haunt you, and ultimately it might lead to disappointment and even damage trust. So for example, in this case with Ellen, whatever we ended up agreeing on, you might say, okay, so we agree that you'll change your deadline and I'll work on this next week and have it in your inbox by next Friday, by close of business next Friday, right? Again, we're reaffirming that that's what our decision was. Or I might say, okay, so it sounds like you're going to go check with Jen and Mark and see if they can do this by Friday, right? We're trying to have a clear agreement on who's doing what we agreed on, and to make sure that there's no disappointment. So that's step 4. And step 5, affirm. Reaffirm actually, the importance and the value of the requester and your relationship with them. Just like we did that at the very beginning of this conversation, we want to do that at the end before leaving the conversation, expressing our appreciation for their interest in our input and closing the conversation on a cooperative and trust-building note. So, for example, with Ellen, I might say, hey, I really appreciate your interest in my input and I appreciate your flexibility, Ellen. I definitely wanted to be sure that you met your deadline and realized the challenges with my accepting your initial request. So I'm glad we were able to figure out a way forward that allows both of us to be successful and avoid frustration or disappointment. I think this whole exchange could probably take about 3 minutes of your time, but it is such a huge investment in the relationship, in productivity, in efficiency. It will allow you to keep your sanity. It will allow you to keep your sovereignty over your schedule and your work and your relationships intact. It will help everyone who's involved to get the best possible outcome in view of the objective reality and the constraints of the situation. Saying no is a totally legitimate thing, but there is a way to go about it. And so I hope that going forward, you will use my philosophy of how and why you should say no when you could, and the 5A formula that helps you do it in a way that is a win-win for everyone. So, what do you think of this approach? Will you give it a try? And after you've given it a try, will you tell me what your results were? I'd love to see your comments in the comment section below on the show notes page, which is on talentgrow.com. And if you found this valuable, I would love for you to share it with someone else who also is challenged by this. I find that tons of people are challenged by how to say no or whether they should say no. So you could help by sharing this with them, and we together can help more people. And finally, I'd love for you to send me a question or tell me a topic that you would like me to cover in a future episode of the Talent Grow Show. I make this podcast to serve you. And so please don't be shy. I'd love to hear how I can serve you better. Thank you for listening. I appreciate your time and your interest, and I hope that this has helped you. I'm Halelly Azulay, your leadership development strategist here at Talent Grow, and this has been another episode of the Talent Grow Show. Until the next time, make today great.
Thanks for listening to the Talent Grow Show, where we help you develop your talent to become the kind of leader that people want to follow. For more information, visit talentgrow.com.